So AJ, in the early days of my introduction to appreciative inquiry in the early 90s, the story was that appreciative inquiry practice was really developed by the GEM program in Africa. So I'd love to hear from you, your version of that story.
Okay, well, I'd love to tell it. Just a little background. I think it wasn't by chance that appreciative inquiry had a start and took hold in Africa. I began my career as a Peace Corps volunteer in Chad, so Africa was always in my heart. And fast forward many years later, I had worked in international development from that time in the 60s forward. And in like 1990, I was asked to develop a leadership training program for CEOs of international aid organizations, and brought Jane Watkins onto the team to help develop that program. And we decided that we were just a bunch of consultants and we needed some kind of institutional credibility. And we went around to quite a few universities and other institutions in the US to see what they might offer. And in the process of doing that, Jane said, well, there's this guy in Cleveland who is doing some really interesting stuff. I think you should go visit him. So I did. Got on a plane and I went to Cleveland and I met David Cooperrider, and I fell in love with his very nascent ideas at that point. This is 1990. That he had been experimenting a bit with it, and invited him to be part of this development of this leadership training program. And in the course of doing that program, he had through NTL, he had gone to Wilgesprit in South Africa to work to do tea groups.
Yeah, he came in 1986, was his first visit to us. Yeah.
And that's when he fell in love with Africa. So it became a no-brainer to go back to Wilgesprit to begin to introduce some of the ideas that we were applying to leadership and strategy in those early years. And so we went and did, this was part of what was called the Organizational Excellence Program. And Wilgesprit participated in that very early iteration. And I remember one of the high points of that trip was we had everybody within Wilgesprit and stakeholders doing interviews with each other. And I was being driven around from my hotel to back to Wilgesprit, and the driver said, well, isn't anybody going to interview me? And so that was a real moment. Yes, everybody in the organization needs to be interviewed. So that was, one seed of appreciative inquiry that was born out of a great question from.
And I think in the end, AJ, we ended up interviewing over 400 people or something with stakeholders, and I remember that it was a beautiful process, and the energy just started to flow.
It did, and we saw in that example that we were onto something, and so that program just blossomed, and there were many other international NGOs that participated in the early pilots of that program, and each time we did one program, we learned more about, we introduced more of the concepts of appreciative inquiry, but still there was still not a 4D process yet. So fast forward again, I'm trying to make this long story a shorter one. the pilots was very well received, and so David and Jane and I thought, okay, we're onto something here, and we've submitted an unsolicited proposal to the office in USAID that had funded the original programs to do a larger long-term introduction of appreciative inquiry into the NGO world globally, and it was accepted. So for the next 7 years, we had $1 million a year to play with to develop the concepts of appreciative inquiry and to apply it in various ways. And through that program, we did more organizational strategy interventions, and we did a lot of workshops on developing authentic partnerships between northern and what were then called northern and southern NGOs, so first world and third world NGOs, developing true partnerships and collaboration. And in one of those early workshops in Zimbabwe, we were sitting around getting ready for this partnership workshop. And so the staff were sitting around. David was at the flip chart, and there were quite a few doctoral students from Case Western there, and some consultants like me and Claudia Liebler and Christopher Seche and a few others. And he was walking us through his thinking of what the kind of linear process of doing an appreciative inquiry would be. And he talked a little bit about interviews and discovery. I think he used the word discovery, and then he said something like, and then we need to really dream big, and then take those dreams and design something. And so I sat back and I said, if you could come up with another D word, you'd have a 4D process. That's how it was named. So it was, David's original ideas of what the flow of a positive change intervention might look like, that basically I just gave a name to. And then, coincidentally, all of his brothers and all of his sisters and he are named, have D names. So it was very synergistic with his life, I think, as well. So there's that. I think that for me, what was having had a career in international development, what was, I think, life-changing about introducing appreciative inquiry into Africa was that it changed the development paradigm. It really flipped the development paradigm on its head. Until then, all of the inputs from donors were expert driven, and the idea was that countries in Africa didn't have anything to offer, and they needed to hear from first world experts how to run things and how to make things better. And as we all know, appreciative inquiry starts by looking at what's working well already and what indigenously is worth preserving and building on. And that was really, in those days, revolutionary. And I laugh every time I get emails from the office at USAID now that's involved with learning and knowledge management, and they've developed a whole approach called collaborative learning and adaptation. And one of the tools in their toolbox is appreciative inquiry, but in reality, the whole approach to collaborative learning comes, I believe, from those early seeds that have been planted and others. The beauty of AI is that since it's so open source, people take to it, love it, adapt it, and believe that it's their own, and then rename it. And yet the real essence of what appreciative inquiry is about rises to the top and permeates the new way of being in the world. And that's the most gratifying thing of all, I believe.